I have never said the following out loud or in text until recently. I opened up to my wife about it because of our new apartment. Anyway, I feel compelled to say here I am a rational man who believes in the scientific method. I believe not just what I see but what can be verified. I have no explanation for what follows, but I can attest that everything is true to the best of my understanding. My grandmother was sensitive. How else to describe it? You'd be having a bad day and she'd call and say she had a feeling you needed to talk. Nothing super crazy or anything, but just always seemed to know what you were feeling, especially when distressed, no matter how far away from you she was or what she was doing. She also would explicitly avoid ghost stories and the like, and while she was very spiritual, she refused to speak about her personal beliefs. I picked up whatever it was she had. My whole life I have just known things. I cannot describe it. When I tried to talk to my wife about this the other night, I said it was like a smell but with your skin. Like my grandmother, I know what people are really feeling. Always. And I've always been able to sense things. What they are. I ghost hunted for a year in my freshman year of college to try to find out, but I never got a satisfactory answer. I don't believe in ghosts, but I know there are things we don't understand. For example, growing up we lived in an old townhouse that was on the land of a man who was truly a monster. Silas Hargrove from Pike County, OH. You can Google him if you'd like. He owned a ton of land and had a habit of running it like a tyrant. He would regularly rape his slaves, and when they would become pregnant he would burn them alive in the limestone furnace he had on his land. I lived on this land. I helped to work on the archaeological dig that eventually dug up the furnace, confirming the myths by finding the bones of his burnt slaves. From the time I was 7 I hated our house. My parents were going through a very rough and violent divorce, and I'm sure that didn't help. But I hated being alone. I could feel something with me all the time and I knew it wasn't nice. It was like a dark shadow that hung in the corner of every room I was in. Especially the basement and my room. For the longest time I thought it was just childish fear of the dark. But then I had a brother. He is not sensitive. But even he felt it. We would both hear footsteps scratching at our bedroom door at night, heavy breathing. I would have a recurring dream every night of going to the top of the basement steps, jumping down into the darkness, landing, climbing back up and doing it again. I have been unable to confirm from my parents if I actually did this, as I have been known to sleepwalk on occasion. But I was never hurt and these were tall stairs. So I'm inclined to think it was just a dream. But every night the same thing, down into the dark. To the point I started to lose sleep. It got worse as I got older. Lights would turn off and on, the TV would cut out for no reason then back on when we got up to check it. Doors would open and close on themselves. I started to see actual shadows moving all the time out of the corner of my eye. Things would go missing and turn up in strange places or months later as if they never had gone anywhere. I started to have the sensation at night that someone wanted to physically attack me. On one occasion I remember having some sort of seizure. I think I was 8 at that point. I never spoke of this to anyone except my brother. And eventually he told me to stop talking about it too. We did move eventually, but not because of this is what I mean. The further we got away from Silas Hargrove's land, the less bad things became. Our new house was across Cincinnati, still his land but not his living property. For a while we had the same. But it didn't feel as heavy at the new house. That makes sense. Things would happen but it was no longer a constant presence. At times these things would happen in front of other people. Lights turning off and on and such. My one friend saw a shadow person with me. We were playing Age of Mythology in my basement and we both saw it move across the wall. I've never seen someone go so pale. LOL, it took him forever to come back to my house after that. Over time, the activity faded, especially as I moved further and further away from the Hargrove estate. I put these things out of my mind. Like I said, I'm a rational person. This shit is crazy. To even type this makes me feel like a lunatic because I mean, come on. So I forgot about it. Occasionally my brother mentions how since I moved out things stopped happening, but mostly we just didn't talk about it. Last year I got a job as a property manager. The woman before me died in the apartment I get to live in of an opioid overdose in 2021. She was here for 3 days and her dog had to eat her face to survive. When we moved in I felt it again. The presence. Not as heavy, not the same, but something there. I put it out of my mind. I ghost hunted for a year. Again, I know the rules. Pay it no mind and it will go away. The woman passed suddenly and violently. She probably was just hanging around to come to terms. My wife spoke to her. Told her thank you for the apartment and to move on. She did this without talking to me and without me to her. I mean, what was I going to say? Honey, I can feel someone here? Ignore it until it goes away? She's my wife and I love her, but if she said that to me would I buy it? Anyway, since then I have felt it more and more. I can see her. Never directly. But I get that smell with my skin every time she is in the room. I know what she looks like even though I've never met her. She just comes and watches. But it's gotten stronger and stronger. I cannot explain it in words, but such a physically overpowering sensation on my skin I had to tell my wife. I have not felt this since I was a child, and even then I figured it was all in my head. When I told my wife what I was feeling, she said the day that she spoke with the woman our dog started sniffing around like crazy. She eventually rooted out a plastic bag from under our heater. It was filled with bloody gauze pads. Probably the woman who lived here before us. She had an opioid addiction and would shoot heroin. These pads were probably what she used on her arm. My wife said she had independently been having the same feeling that someone was around, and that's why she spoke to her in the first place. We've since gone on to ignore it. But what I can't ignore is what I feel. I think I have what my grandmother had. But I don't have a name for it or an explanation for what is going on. And that makes me feel afraid. I mean, is consciousness a natural phenomenon like radio waves, and our bodies just antennae that pick up specific frequencies for a time? Is her frequency still vibrating in this apartment? Do I have some kind of recessive gene that gives me a broader perception of the fourth dimension, and as such I can pick up on this woman for whatever reason? And why does it seem to be places where negative things happened? Why not positive things like the spot where two people fell in love? I never get anything from stuff like that, not unless it's truly overpowering, in which case most folks pick up on it anyway. Boy howdy, this got long. But if you can't vent your insanity onto the internet, where can you? Also, all jokes aside, if anyone has any experience with this type of thing, please reach out to me. The next story will have you questioning everything. Let's get into it. Have plenty of stories to share about my family, ranging from skinwalkers to weird encounters with strangers, and I want to talk about them all, but this post may get too long and may have to split it into 2 parts. I'll start with a bit of background. I live in southeastern Oklahoma in a rural neighborhood. I live with my mom, dad, aunt, 2 siblings, and grandparents, so around 8 people in the same house. This happened about 5 years ago on a basic day around 3 p.m. on a Saturday, still bright as day. My little sister was just born and was in her stroller at least 7 feet from the front door. Me and my siblings were in the living room and my mom was in the kitchen, all of us in full view of the front door, which was wide open. Mom was dancing in the kitchen when she froze, staring at the front door. My siblings heard her stop and looked up. From where we were, we could see the door was open but not outside. Confused, I asked, "What's wrong?" She turned, now facing the door, and said, "Hello, can I help you?" My sister, sitting next to me, said someone was outside. I peeked out the window but only saw a blur because of the fogged up glass. I didn't care and ignored it. The rest of the story is from my mom's point of view, which she told me later. She said she felt eyes on her and turned to see a man standing at the foot of the door. She asked, "Can I help you?" while moving my little sister away from the door. He stepped back but kept eye contact. Every time she moved forward, he moved back. He then stared at our unfinished bird feeders, Dad had made them, and asked about them. Mom explained, and he asked if her husband was home. She said no. To most, that'd be a mistake, but we had a 55-pound Rottweiler and a 35-pound pit bull mix, so we felt safe. As Mom got closer, he stepped back and put his hands at his waist. He claimed he lived in the house that looked like a witch's cabin and pointed to a place 2 blocks down. That house was known to neighborhood kids as the haunted house. Its windows boarded up and chains on the doors. What creeped Mom out was how he walked backward down the street. She ran inside and locked the door. We haven't seen him since. Next story, a skinwalker type situation. Our cousins and uncle visited our ranch. While playing outside, we spotted 2 young hawks in a tree. We'd never seen hawks in Oklahoma before, and as dumb kids, we threw rocks at them. For some reason they didn't fly away, they started bleeding. Our uncle saw us and yelled to stop. They flew off and we forgot about it until later. That night, as we prepped a bonfire, a woman approached our gate. She was filthy and reeked. Our dad and uncle went to talk to her. When she saw my uncle, she grabbed his hand and thanked him repeatedly, her nails digging into his skin. He asked, "For what?" She said, "For not letting them kill my children." As she walked away, my cousin muttered, "Filthy rat." She froze, 50 feet away, and turned toward us. I swear she never turned her head. Final story, told to Mom by her cousin. For privacy, I'll call him TJ. TJ was in the mob as a teen but left at 28 to become a pastor. One night, on his way to the store, a man dragged him into a dark alley. The man screamed incoherently, then dropped to all fours. TJ said he transformed into a coyote, lunged at him, then shifted into a jaguar mid-leap. It pinned TJ, snarling at his face. In panic, he yelled, In Jesus' name, get this thing off me. It flew backward like it was thrown against a wall and fled. Mom says skinwalkers are people who pact with the devil to shapeshift. She's been Pentecostal all her life. In case you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and helps us continue bringing you more spine-chilling content. The next story will have you questioning everything. Let's get into it. I recently moved into a cliffside manor in coastal Maine, just temporarily. It's a complicated situation. The property belongs to my uncle, who's overseas for 6 months managing a business venture. I was staying there alone, so naturally I wondered, what if it's haunted? There wasn't anything in the house when I arrived. There is now. I was unpacking in the grand foyer when the doorbell chimed. Immediate red flags. The manor sits atop Hollow Point, accessible only by a winding private road. You don't end up here by accident. Standing there was a woman in her late 60s, or maybe older. Her skin had a waxy, ageless quality. Though it was 4:30 p.m., her presence unsettled me. She stood 6 feet 5 inches, her moth-eaten tweed coat swallowing her frame like it belonged to someone else. She clasped my hand with icy fingers, her smile stretching too wide, and claimed she represented the Coastal Heritage Society. Asked if she could discuss local preservation efforts. My gut screamed no, but I couldn't refuse. She was just a senior, right? Mistake. I led her to the parlor. She shuffled behind me, her oversized Oxfords clacking unevenly on the marble. She collapsed into an armchair uninvited, grinning until I sat across from her. 4:45 seconds, silence. Just that fixed smile and unblinking stare. As I opened my mouth to speak, she pulled a lime-green gelatinous candy from her pocket, wrapped in yellowed cellophane. Eat, she rasped, her voice barely audible. I unwrapped it, pressured by her manic nodding. The stench hit first, like spoiled seafood left in July sun. I gagged but forced it down, my throat burning. She muttered incessantly, but between the taste and her whisper, I caught nothing. I bolted to the kitchen for water. 28 seconds later, she'd vanished. I tore through the 12-bedroom estate, checking closets, behind drapes, even the dumbwaiter. Nothing. By nightfall, I'd convinced myself it was just an odd encounter. Until I found another green candy on the grand piano the next morning. The Rockhaven PD dismissed me after confirming no Coastal Heritage Society exists. I researched the house and 5-acre grounds, finding nothing. By bedtime, I'd rationalized it. She left the candy yesterday. You missed it. She's harmless. 2:18 a.m. I jerked awake, heart pounding. As I fumbled for the lamp, the light flickered on to reveal her looming over my bed, pupils shrunk to pinpricks. I screamed, she skittered backward, joints popping, and vanished into the hall. Human brains have a fail-safe for the incomprehensible. Burglars? Lions? Fine. But her? I barricaded the door with a walnut dresser, then tried calling 911. No service. Later, technicians found no issues. She blocked it. The third-floor window dropped 20 feet to jagged rocks. A broken ankle meant being dragged back into the dark. So I snapped off a bedpost and crept downstairs, phone light trembling. The front door's triple deadbolts taunted me. As I undid the second lock, a guttural wail echoed from the stairs. I turned, she lurched toward me, neck bent at a 90-degree angle, jaw unhinged. I don't remember unchaining the door. Maybe I ripped it off its hinges. Her long-nailed hands grazed my collar as I slammed it shut. I sprinted half a mile to a lighthouse keeper's cottage. The cops came, shrugged, and left. It's been 14 days. I'm crashing at a coworker's loft, sleeping with a hatchet. The manor's owners return in 5 months. How do I warn them? This isn't a ghost. It's a parasite. Now I triple-check every lock, every shadow. Pray it wanted the cliffside manor, not me. In case you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and helps us continue bringing you more spine-chilling content. The next story will have you questioning everything. Let's get into it. The Silent Ones. In the remote town of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the woods of Montana, there stood an abandoned schoolhouse. It had been closed for over 30 years, its windows shattered, and its roof sagging under years of rot. The locals whispered about the place, warning travelers to stay away. They called it Whispering Pines, but no one dared explain why. For journalist Emma Reed, stories like this were gold. She thrived on uncovering the truth behind local legends. So when she stumbled across a dusty old police report mentioning the unexplained disappearance of 27 students and 3 teachers from Whispering Pines Elementary in 1989, she knew she had her next big article. Armed with her camera, a flashlight, and a tape recorder, Emma drove to Black Hollow under a gray, overcast sky. The townspeople refused to speak to her directly about the school. They only muttered vague warnings, "Don't stay past sundown," and "The ones who hear the whispers never come back." Emma dismissed their superstitions as small-town hysteria. That night, she parked her car on the overgrown gravel road leading to the schoolhouse and trekked through the dense pines. The air was thick with the smell of moss and damp earth, and the forest was eerily silent. No rustling leaves, no chirping crickets. When the schoolhouse loomed into view, Emma paused. Even in its state of decay, there was something oppressive about it, as though the building itself was alive and watching her. She shook off the unease and entered through the rusted double doors. Inside, the air was stale and cold, far colder than it had been outside. Her flashlight beam danced across graffiti-scrawled walls, overturned desks, and decaying textbooks. The silence pressed in around her, broken only by the creak of the floorboards under her boots. She pulled out her tape recorder and began narrating her observations. In one of the classrooms, she found an old chalkboard. Written in faint, chalky letters were the words, "Do not listen to them." A chill ran down her spine, but she brushed it off. Kids from the town must have snuck in over the years to scare people like her. The real find came in the principal's office. A locked drawer in the desk had been forced open, revealing yellowed papers and a single Polaroid photo. Emma held it up to the light. It was a class picture, the kind taken every year. The children were smiling, their teacher standing proudly behind them. But their faces were slightly blurred, as though they had moved when the photo was taken. Emma squinted. No, the children weren't blurred, they were wrong. Their eyes were hollow, empty sockets, and their smiles stretched unnaturally wide, revealing too many teeth. She dropped the photo, her heart pounding. That's when she heard it, faint whispers coming from the hallway. "Help us." Emma froze. The voice was faint but unmistakable, a child's voice trembling with fear. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaking. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They came from all directions now, overlapping in a chorus of desperation. "Help us, don't leave, stay." Emma backed out of the office, her flashlight trembling in her grip. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered, and the air grew colder with each step. Shadows seemed to writhe in the corners of her vision, but every time she turned, there was nothing there. She reached the entrance, only to find the doors she had come through were gone. The wall was solid, the wood warped and splintered as though no door had ever existed. Panic set in. She ran back the way she came, but the layout of the school had changed. The hallways twisted and turned in impossible ways, leading her deeper into the building. The whispers followed her, growing louder and more distorted, until they weren't whispers at all but guttural, inhuman growls. She stumbled into the gymnasium and slammed the door shut behind her. The room was empty, save for a single figure standing in the center. It was a child, a young boy no older than 7. His back was to her and his head hung low. "Hey," Emma said, her voice cracking. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The boy didn't move. Cautiously, Emma approached, her footsteps echoing in the vast, silent space. She reached out to touch his shoulder and he turned. His face was featureless. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched tight over his skull. Emma screamed and stumbled backward, but the boy was gone. The whispers returned, deafening now, screaming incoherent words that clawed at her sanity. The walls of the gymnasium began to close in, the wood groaning as it warped and buckled. From the darkness, more figures emerged, children with hollow eyes, featureless faces, and twisted smiles that split their heads in half. They surrounded her, reaching out with cold, bony hands. "You heard us," they whispered in unison, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of despair. "Now you belong to us." The last thing Emma saw was the featureless boy, his head tilting unnaturally as he leaned close. "Stay," he hissed. The townspeople of Black Hollow found Emma's car abandoned on the gravel road the next morning. Her belongings were still inside, but there was no sign of her. The only thing they found was her tape recorder, lying in the dirt near the schoolhouse. When they played it back, they heard her voice, trembling and frantic, followed by a low, chilling whisper. "I'm waiting for you in the tall grass." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling stories. And hit the bell icon to never miss an update.